Everyone, and recording's in progress. So, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're dialing in from, so to speak. Thank you for joining us for this session. My name is Navin Mahavijan. I'm head of community at Agiloft, a leading contract lifecycle management and AI platform and I do stuff like this. So my background is that, I started out as an attorney in oil and gas long before the words AI were anything but, a trope in science fiction movies. And so, today, with all of the tools available to us, trying to figure out how to best implement them, it's a really fun time. Now, I got into legal ops ages ago, long before it was called legal operations, and it was just here's a list of tasks that the attorneys don't want to do. Let's have Navin do it because he likes that tech stuff. So, and of course, the profession has evolved since then in innovating how legal teams work, from billing to matter management to contract management to outside counsel spend management, and that is growing daily, as some of you in the audience, I'm sure, have learned to expect as well. So our session today is about AI in legal, transforming the future of legal operations. So now that's a hefty title, and I hope that we can at least share. I know we will share some interesting insights from both my friend Josh. We're going to start a fireside chat shortly, and of course the panel discussion as well. So again, thank you for joining. And as a bit of housekeeping, those of you that aren't familiar with the chat function in Zoom, please drop any questions. If you agree with anything we say, please feel free to agree. If you strongly disagree, even better, share your thoughts with us as well, because we love those. So we'll try to answer your questions as we go along. And, sometimes we might pass on them in the interest of time, but we'll try to respond after as well. So why don't we get going with our fireside chat? And Josh, if you could just join me, my pal Josh Moore is the director of sales engineering at Checkbox. And, Josh, I know you work with legal teams across multiple industries to, streamline and automate how they work, and to be more, help them be more effective as well. So welcome. Thank you for joining me. I think our biggest headache this morning will be you and I only have 30 minutes to talk about this
I
stuff,
know.
right?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to be here and thanks for the introduction. And thanks everyone for spending some time today with us. This will be insightful. I know it. I've
There
worked with
you
Nevin before. One of the best.
Josh, I mean, the title of our fireside chat, for those of you that didn't read the agenda, shame on you, is Prioritizing Legal Front Door, the right AI investment for legal. So, Josh, why don't we just jump right in? I know whenever I'm at conferences, when I talk to heads of legal operations or, customers of Agiloft, my friends, colleagues that are in the trenches every day, one thing that I hear a lot of is that they are under pressure to use AI. And, whether that's from their C-suite or from the GC, just use AI, this nebulous term, right? Which we all know, if you just go out and buy tech and slap it on your process, that's probably not the right way to go. Uh,
It's not going to
are
work.
you seeing legal teams being under pressure currently to use AI more or to do more with AI?
Absolutely. And this is what's like kind of funny. I remember maybe like 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I went to a conference and one of the table discussions was around basically, hey, there's AI. What are your policies? How can we make sure the business is
Mhm.
not using AI? And there was a lot of hesitation. I know it's like traditionally, right? Legal is maybe a laggard when it comes to technology adoption, but
Yeah.
it's fascinating to see in 3 years. Now it's just like we're good, like we're full steam ahead on AI. And yeah, but you're right. Like where do we put it? In the legal front
Yeah.
door, it does seem like a reasonable place to start because that's where anything starts, is where the
Mhm.
request begins. So yeah, we are seeing a lot of demand now. Maybe a lot of top-down approach of like, hey, AI is okay to use now. Like, let's make it happen.
Well, exactly right. So I kind of, you know me, I live and breathe CLM, contracts,
Yeah.
contracts, contracts. And while that is a big chunk of the work in-house teams do, that's not all they do, right? And
Yeah.
it covers the spectrum. I kind of mentioned it in my own intro, around matter management, research studies that they're doing on regulatory changes, just random asks for opinions that about product development, right, is what we're doing legal? Can we patent something? So, depending on the industry you're in, legal teams field a lot of different questions far beyond just document creation and review, right? And so I think that's where the concept of a front door, where, because I know for me, and I think most of us in the audience can relate as well, right, Josh? Whenever we've joined a new organization, or if you work with clients and you get onboarded, one of the first things you wind up getting is, here's your Okta screen or some kind
Hmm.
of dashboard with 15 to 20 to 100 different programs that I need to go to for different functions, and that's the same thing with legal, and the same with, across the organization as well, right? And so when you talk about the legal front door, what does that actually mean? And I hope it's not, knock on Navin's door and ask him to do stuff for you.
No, it's not. Although it could be if you want it. No, no, the legal front
Okay,
door, it's a
so
great
you
point.
heard it here first, right? Checkbox will integrate with my study door. So we'll talk
That's
later.
right. No, the legal front door, it's kind of becoming like a hot topic in the
Hmm.
industry. And it's this idea of, I mean, I don't know if you, for those on the call, like think about when's the last time somebody in the business asked you to do something and how did they get to you? Well,
Hmm.
maybe they sent you a message in Teams, or maybe they emailed you, or maybe you have a Microsoft form that they fill out. There's a whole bunch of different avenues that the business can get requests to you. And oftentimes it's fragmented. There's no rules, there's no conditions. It's just the wild, wild west. That's where like a legal front door comes into play, is allowing the business to do what they're doing, but
Hmm.
all requests will funnel in through that front door. And that front door is what's going to say, oh, you need Novin to review some marketing material. Well, before we let Novin take that, you need to tell us what's the material? Is it ad? Is it social
Hmm.
media? Have you already got approval? We're going to be not necessarily the gatekeeper, but that administrative layer so that when Novin gets the request, it's actually complete and he can take it and start running with it.
I like that. I am not a big fan of incomplete requests. And I think the part about, me, say, in that reviewer role, getting to work in my system of choice as well, right? So kind of, you know how it is with organizations, especially larger ones. We have all these different enterprise applications. And today's one of today's main problems, right, Josh, is that kind of getting out of flow state where I have to log out of one system, go to
Hmm.
another system. Case in point, Salesforce, right? A CRM system. I'm just using them as my
Yep.
standard, but salespeople live and breathe in that, sometimes kicking and screaming, but having
Yes.
them now come out of that system to go somewhere else versus integrating, or for me to never have to go into Salesforce to do something, but have kind of a standardized interface that I can work through this front door to kind of push requests back and forth to different systems, I think is really powerful because, and in my perfect world, I would just have one system that I always kind of submit requests through. And then, I don't need to ever see these 10 different, probably amazing systems that were fantastically implemented. I just don't have the brain capacity to learn 10 different systems. I got to do my job, right? So I think that's
Yeah.
really powerful. Question for the attendees, if you want to drop in chat, are you working with some kind of front door right now? Have you built something homegrown, or are you kind of jumping from system to system and guiding your, colleagues and stakeholders to do that as well? Curious to hear how many people are doing, because I know we talk about it a lot, but this is something that I think is now, Josh, kind of getting to the forefront. People weren't always kind of thinking about the front door aspect because it used to be so difficult, right? And it's a lot easier with AI today. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the investment part of this, because that's what I always think of, right? My boss tells me to use AI, and then I go, okay, but then 4 years, well, not even 4 years, let's say 18 months from now, after I've spent my AI budget, that same boss is going to come back to me and say, so Navin, what's the return on investment? And that's where I go, I don't have any, or I just got, an LLM model and made it available to everyone in Slack so they could ask it questions, but I can't prove ROI. Tell us a bit about why the legal front door could be a really practical and beneficial investment for companies.
Yeah. A lot of legal teams I work with, they know they're busy and they know that they have a lot to do, but they don't have a way
Mhm.
to prove it because without a legal front door, with requests coming in from all these avenues, unless your team is doing a very good job at manually tracking all of this behind the
Mhm.
scenes, there's no data. And if there's no
Yeah.
data, it's hard to make decisions just based on gut feelings that, oh, I
Hmm.
know I'm busy. I know I'm swamped, but like, prove it. That's
Yep.
where that ROI with the legal front door comes in. Is because now all the requests are at least going through a front door. We now know, well, what's happening? Where is it
Hmm.
happening? We can see trends in the types of requests. In fact, we've even had customers that go, oh, you know what, like we have a huge problem with this particular issue. Like our attorneys are screaming at us, the business is saying they're slow. But once we set up a legal front door, we actually found that that actually wasn't the case. They just were the loudest ones in the company. There was a bigger problem over here. Now we have the data to visualize that and we
Hmm.
can go down and make that process better.
No, no. I mean, I have lived exactly that, right? Sometimes the loudest complainer or that one kind of high profile deal that
Yep.
got delayed isn't the actual problem, right? Like once you
Yeah.
have that data visibility, yes, this deal got delayed, but what it got delayed by was the 55 email requests for low value tasks that we could kind of, today deflect with AI or kind of collect additional information. Because I know even when I was working as an attorney, you'd get a request and then I'm not always checking every single email as it comes in. So then, I might come back to it the day after tomorrow. And then I realize it's
Hmm.
incomplete. I don't have enough information. I have to send it back to the guy. And of course, the person that submitted it would say, legals being a blocker, they don't
Yep.
want to help me out and stuff. But I want to help. By the time I get to it, I just don't have the information. And having a systematized way to actively collect and triage the stuff, I think of it almost as tedium reduction, right? We're getting rid of, and I know it's cliche to say kind of, get rid of all the low value stuff, automate it away so that we can focus on the stuff that actually matters, that deal that needed to be signed by end of day
Hmm.
today. But instead, I'm kind of working through the 50 emails and stuff's getting lost in all that noise, right? So I do think that and then tying it back to, of course, things like speed and revenue velocity and stuff like that. Someone like me, I could take that and show return on investment. Like we spend this much, but we've accelerated revenue. These deals would not have closed this month, or it's just we're spending attorney time better. A bunch of highly paid lawyers should didn't really go to law school to just email triage. Yeah, so
Yeah.
so I do like that a lot. Let's talk about kind of what that looks like in practice, right? So Josh, you and I could talk all day about concepts, getting data, and all that stuff. But if you had, like, if I were to have a legal front door or want to implement something to that effect, what does that really look like? What should I be focusing on? Or what should the audience be focusing on? Because I kind of know the answers here.
Yeah. Yeah. For some organizations, they know what their requests are. They know what information they need to get. They know where the bottlenecks are. They have a lot of that in place,
Hmm.
but they don't have a tool to help operationalize it. For other organizations, they're just trying not to sink. They're just taking stuff in and they're working it. And there are
Hmm.
silos and they don't know what they don't know. What's nice about AI today, and like for checkbox in particulars, you don't even need to know. You can just send your legal inbox and we will
Hmm.
automatically classify all your different kinds of requests and what
Hmm.
information you typically need for those kinds of requests. So it's actually a low barrier now with AI because a lot of that work can just be done automatically. And we can set up that framework for you based on what you've already done in Teams and Slack and email and one-off
Hmm.
avenues. So it's not difficult now to do all of that. And granted, because we specialize with in-house teams,
Hmm.
we have a lot of it already templatized. Like we know that if someone submits a request for new intellectual property to be reviewed, we know we're
Hmm.
going to need ABC, XYZ.
Yep. I think that's great because sometimes, everyone's on a different maturity scale, right? You've
Hmm.
got folks, probably some of you in the audience, right, that are still doing intake via email or some chat tool like Slack or Teams. And predictably, that's not as fun. And there's only so many bodies you can throw at that problem as well, or
Yes.
at least that you will get budget for, right?
Yeah.
And then you've got people on the other extreme where maybe we don't have a front door yet, but we have a lot of different mature systems that everyone's kind of working in. We've refined everything to a T, and we don't want to try to rip everything out, but we also realize that it's still creating a kind of administrative overhead when we have to make sure things go into the right machine, so to speak, right? Um, so I always think about that because it's easy to say, oh, we've got these systems, and having that front door be kind of the first thing I implement to
Hmm.
start tracking. Uh, Obviously, I think this is where your team comes in with. If I don't quite know, or I have kind of a process that's homegrown because I deal with it via email, getting that insight around how can I more effectively build that intake form or the smart intake form so people can just say, hey, I want to go to legal. This is what I need. And then it prompts you to fill out uh, information based on your need versus, kind of a massive 100-page questionnaire, which I hope you guys never do. That
No, don't do
uh,
that.
and one thing that I find very interesting is, of course, I think the AI guided intake aspect of it,
Hmm.
right? It's not just that, you know, legal front door is just another extra intake form that sits over all the other intake forms for the different system, right? It's that it can, to a certain extent, understand what you're uploading or what you're asking for and provide you with some guidance so that I can
Yeah.
provide all the information I need to legal, right?
Yeah. We call it conversational intake. And so
Hmm.
like great examples are like Agilov, even like we integrate with. If I were to
Yeah.
send an email to legal and say, hey, I have this contract I need you to review, and I attach it. Well,
Hmm.
checkbox can actually extract information from the contract,
Yep.
recognize that, oh, because the value is over $1 million, it needs to go to this person, and then we'll push it
Hmm.
to Agilov, and then Agilov will take
Hmm.
over. For the
I'm glad
requester,
you.
it's frictionless.
Exactly, exactly. I think that's the beauty of it, right? Before I say that, I'm glad you brought it up because I feel like it would have been too self-serving if I said Agiloft, given my role. But I think that one piece, because I always put myself, obviously in legal, I kind of go, I don't want a lot of busy work. I want to be able to focus on what matters, but I still have to sift through that. And so the legal front door kind of takes that problem away from me.
Hmm.
But when I think about my requesters, it's great for them as well because they know they can just come to this one place and it will give them guidance, not, oh, go watch a 20-minute training video so that you
Yes.
know exactly what you need to give Navin so he can do his job. And so that helps them too. It's we call it user experience, right, in the tech space, but it's just so I get to do my job easily is kind of what my stakeholders would tell me. It's just submit it. If I don't know, and I think the other piece is ideally with users, they're not always there's no one person typically submitting, hey, I've got 10 requests to legal every week. Maybe if your organization has a lot of litigation against it, good
Yeah.
luck with that. But typically, you'll interact with legal once a year or once a quarter,
Yeah.
unless you're in very specific functions. And so, having that guidance versus having to read a guide or again, text someone, message someone, and go, hey, what am I supposed to do, Josh? And then now you have to take time out to explain it to me. I
Yeah.
think this is where AI shines at the intake level. And I've seen it done even just purely on the contract side, right? Where the AI can kind of sit behind the intake and just triage it and decide, hey, this doesn't even need review because it
Hmm.
all out key low value stuff, right? Obviously, I wouldn't
Yeah.
suggest that we put $100 million contract through AI without human eyeballs, but automating that stuff away is, I think, really powerful. See, I told you, Josh, we would
Yeah.
definitely run out of time here. I think let's talk about some practical advice for how teams can get started. Like so, if I were to ask you, well, I'm going to ask you to give some advice to the audience for those of the folks here that have never really ever looked at a front door as a potential implementation. Where should they begin? Like, where should they start? Besides calling you, of course. But
Yeah, that's true. Just call us and we'll help do it all. No, it's a good point. And it probably will start with really identifying what you're doing today. Like, what is the
Mhm,
processes today for clients that I've worked with that go live quick? Like, we actually just had a Fortune 500 customer go live in 52 days with
mhm,
their legal front door. And they did some of that legwork up front. Like, they recognized, okay, I know that if I get an employment issue, it's going to route to this person, and this is the information that they would typically want. I know that we use Salesforce, and so we need to be
mhm,
able to connect our contracts from Salesforce to route through the front door to get to our CLM. So
mhm,
if you're able to process map out what the work the team is doing today, it gives you a
mhm,
tremendous head start. Now, of course, that does take time. And with AI, like honestly, a lot of that we can just dump in and do it
mhm.
automatically for you with some internal
Yep.
tools that we have. But really, that's like the first step is understanding what is the process today, because that's
Mhm.
where we can then take it and make it better or start automating things or removing administrative work.
I like it. Let's call this the first commandment of the front door. Know thyself.
Yes,
I think that's
exactly.
something sometimes in the rush to get a technology solution, we don't do the legwork, and then if I were implementing something like this, I'd want my front door to be as effective as possible. Obviously, I'd iterate on it,
Hmm.
every year, every 2 years. In my case, probably every 6 months because I'm twitchy, but but you obviously want it to uh, cover as much as you can and be as easy to use for the largest number of your, legal stakeholders within the organization. So I think knowing your own process, knowing what's working, what doesn't work, where some of the bottlenecks are, I think can be. I think you're absolutely right, Josh. It's the first step, and I think that really goes for any technology implementation, right? You can't just slap AI, tech, SaaS, whatever you want to call it, onto your problems and hope they'll go away. I mean, it might make some things easier, but long term, you're missing out on some huge return on investment. But Josh, I'm going to ask you the difficult question as well, because it's never all sunshine and rainbows with these tech implementations, right? What do you see are some, major mistakes people make when they're attempting to kind of roll out a front door that people in the audience should really try to avoid if they're thinking about doing this?
Yeah, I think one of the hesitations I've seen is actually from the legal professional's perspective of
Mm-hmm.
having a centralized place to go and to work out of and to action requests, which you might think is like counterintuitive. It should make their life
Mm-hmm.
easier. But a lot of people, they got out of the law firm space because they didn't want to do this time tracking and billable
Yes.
hours work. And so there's this perception that, oh, I'm getting back to where I left.
Mm-hmm.
That's where with legal front door, and we haven't talked about this, it kind of goes to the next level of
Yeah.
yes, we can make it very easy for the business to get work legal. But on the flip side, we can make it very easy for legal to get requests back to the business because
Mm-hmm.
that's where it moves from like a routing and intake layer to actually helping with decision making. So, for
Mm-hmm.
example, let's say that marketing materials review I sent to you. Well,
Mm-hmm.
we already know what you did the last 15 times you
Yeah.
reviewed marketing materials. Checkbox can actually just provide a draft response. So the
Mm-hmm.
legal team can open that request and go, oh, look, based upon what we've done in the past 15 times, like, here's what you should recommend. So we can
Yep.
actually help do that first layer of decision making as well. Of course, based on your playbooks and your processes and how you would
Mm-hmm.
do things. And that's where there's a big gap too, is like, oh, like for contracting, like everyone knows this idea of a playbook, but
Mm-hmm.
playbooks can apply for all the other non-contracting requests as well.
Yes. Yes.
And people don't have those built out at all.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're kind of built out in people's heads,
They're
that's the
exactly,
toughest part,
or in email threads
Yes, yes. Oh no, and imagine searching for an email from a year ago. Yeah, I can
that
barely keep
somebody
track of
else
my
did
email.
even. Yeah.
Yeah, I can barely keep track of my emails from yesterday, but I know that example, Josh, just around marketing, right? Everyone in the audience that's in healthcare, their ears just perked up, right? Because this is exactly, I think, the best use case for AI. Well, not the best, but one of the best. But
Yeah.
it's just you in healthcare, if you say, hey, there's a 60% success rate, improves this by this much, you can't just do that. I mean, marketing folks would love those big numbers, and we want them to be true, but you have to cite a research study, and legal typically
Hmm.
reviews them, right? I'm sure you see this with some of your customers as well. And so having that AI just, hey, you need to have XYZ put in here first so that when it comes to me in legal, I'm not reviewing it twice. I can just give it the once over and sign off so that you can, as the marketer, can go and publish it within your deadline, because these are all really time sensitive. And the absolute worst thing is it kind of sitting in limbo because I can't
Yep.
do what I need and they need to give me the actual information. So I love that. And it's built on what we've already approved in the past as well. So no, that I think is really cool. And with mistakes to avoid, I always also think about just that flexibility. If it's your first time doing it, don't try to cram every single possible thing into your front door. Like go for those kind of low effort but high
Yeah.
volume things, right? I'm sure you see as
Yep.
well where maybe I can put 80% or 60% of my legal activity into that front door as a phase one. Now that your mileage may vary depending on where you are as well in your own legal ops journey. For this is specific to the audience, right? But I think that is something that everyone makes that mistake. I want it to be perfect before I hit publish, and it is
Yes.
just the worst move you can make because you could be getting so much of these efficiency gains now. And that will free up all this time for you to then, in a phase two, do even cooler stuff. And,
Yes.
those of us that have been doing legal ops for a long time, we kind of know this. But if you're early on in your career, especially, that's the right move. Like just get what you can out the door to start getting those gains as soon as possible. To your, I think, did you say it was 50 days of implementation?
52 days. Yeah.
52 days. There we
But
go. I
yeah,
like it.
they had already crawled and walked before at that point, and they were ready to run.
hmm No, exactly. And I guess why don't we does anyone in the audience have questions for Josh and me about what we've just talked about? Just drop it in chat. And Josh, one of the things that just drop questions in chat. We'll try to get as many as we can. If you feel shy and you don't want to type, that's fine. Don't forget, Josh and I are both on LinkedIn, and as you can see, we are
Hmm.
very chatty gentlemen. So you can message us, ask us questions, about your own specific use case. We'd always be happy to chat. And also, Josh, you'll be at Clock in, I think, less than 2 weeks at this point, right?
And aren't
So,
we all excited for it?
yep, yep. Oh, I think we've got some questions. All right. So, from Zoe, do you see legal front door evolving into a decision-making layer, or will it remain primarily routing and intake? I have an opinion on this, Josh, but I want to let you go first.
Yeah, we do. We do see that as the legal front door, there can definitely be decision-making layer. And honestly, we do it today. I've seen
Mhm.
it really depends on the risk tolerance of the organization. So, like
Yeah.
for example, if we look at let's say a conflict of interest disclosure, maybe I disclose some conflict based on your past conflicts. Yes, checkbox
Hmm.
should recommend a particular decision. Maybe it needs to go to the committee to review
Hmm.
versus typically when we talk about phase steps, like actually checkbox will make a recommendation, but we're going to actually loop in legal, hit the button to submit and make sure that's correct.
Yeah.
So there's oftentimes a human in the loop first, but for certain kinds of like low hanging fruit you mentioned, that's like it's pretty much black and white. Yeah,
Hmm.
checkbox can deflect some of that and provide that decision making layer so that the legal team is reserved for that really strategic, high value work that you go to law school for.
Exactly. We always crack this. I didn't go to law school to review NDAs
Yeah,
or statements of work to just, check if the pricing had the comma in the correct location, and stuff like that. So, I
you
think we
didn't?
have time.
Oh, no.
Oh, well, I mean, it depends on the attorney, right? But we're sticklers for details, so you can't help it. It's drilled into you for years, and it's call it, legal PTSD, if you will. We have one
Oh,
last question, Josh, that I think we can address from an anonymous attendee. I did not know we could do that. So,
oh,
but can we talk a little bit about change management when implementing the front door? So their team currently uses a task manager that they're going to convert to a legal front door. And the company is small, which, they're thinking change management will be easier. But do you have maybe one or two solid change management tips to look out for them to look out for?
yeah. So for like smaller organizations, really this idea of we meet the business where they work. And so legal's unique where really like anybody in the company could submit something for legal to review. I could be in support, I could be in marketing, I could be in HR, I could be in sales. So there's a lot of different ways, but if you can meet
Hmm.
them like earlier, Salesforce, like why not just have a button in Salesforce they could click and it routes it
Yep.
right to legal? Versus if I'm in HR, maybe I connect it to my legal inbox versus I have a Teams app for people in support to leverage. So
Hmm.
meeting the business where they work, we've seen helps with a lot of change management because they
Yep.
don't even have to change their process. They can work where they already are, but that legal
Hmm.
front door will get it from where they are and bring it to where legal needs to then action it.
I'll end and then we can move into our panel discussion, Josh. But when I think about change management, we don't need to kind of rehash the standard
That could be
change
an
management
hour
stuff.
long session
Training,
alone.
training, and all
Yeah.
that stuff, and building champions, what have you. But I think my perspective now with change management is how much of it can I skip entirely, right? And I think that's the philosophy that you just outlined is just when I think about building that front door for my stakeholders, let me make it as the least obtrusive it can be, just a button in Salesforce so they can easily access it without having to learn too much. So you kind of just severely truncate, or I should say significantly truncate, because this is an
Hmm.
important, like a beneficial thing. You significantly truncate your, change management because there's just less of it to do. They're not having to learn a whole new system of, here's a new UI, here's what you do. It's simple and it's easy. And then the SMEs or the people that live in these other complex systems, they know what they're doing and they're just firing on all cylinders there as well and doing more complex work, if you will. So with that, thank you everyone. We're not done just yet. We're going to move into our panel conversation. So let's get started on that. So we are going to spend the next 45 minutes talking about AI, risk compliance, and building a future-ready legal function. And before I introduce the rest of our amazing panel, uh, I think this conversation is really timely now because although AI is really popular, right? You can't get away from someone talking about it on LinkedIn or at a conference or, well, this webinar that you signed up for. So I think it's not something that's in the future. We're all facing pressures to use AI more, whether it's top down from your C-suite, or if it's just at your level where, hey, I need to find efficient ways to do the work that we're already having to handle because I'm not going to be able to hire five new attorneys next year. It's like I'm at a ceiling, and I'm picking on attorneys, but I think everyone gets the kind of headcount challenge as well, right? And also we want to be more effective for the business. So how can we, use AI to get at data faster, to make decisions faster, whether that's your contract data, your spend data, things like that. And so I think this conversation should be fun, but also I think it can be scary because not all of us are ready, whether we don't have the right governance framework or we just don't have the skill set to really implement AI because, using Chat GPT a little bit on weekends to, as a Google search supplement is not the same thing as rolling out AI efficiently for the legal function. It's still easier, I will say, compared to some of the SaaS platforms I've used over the years, but it's something you have to really think through from start to finish. And so we've got a great panel for you here that I am now going to introduce. So first off, we have Kannan Drew, founder of Law Tunes and researcher on law and AI at The Hague University. So Kannan's been pioneering legal education and making complex legal concepts accessible, especially as AI reshapes how the legal profession actually works, how we interact with our clients, whether you're in private practice or in-house. So, Kannan, thank you for joining us. I think the education part is really, really important. And, if I were going to law school today, I'd want to see courses on legal operations, on tech, on AI, and how I can use these tools very effectively beyond just, how to look up case law and statutes online, which was kind of, what we used to, well, some law schools still do that. Of course, for those of you that joined late and missed the fireside chat, we also have Josh Moore, Director of Sales Engineering at Checkbox. So Checkbox is, a legal tech platform that's really at the forefront of AI intelligence, workflow automation. We were talking about Josh and I, legal front door, kind of having
Mhm.
uh, a tool just sit at the top of your entire legal tech stack. And I would almost want to say, Josh, I think maybe the entire organizational tech stack sometimes, because
Yeah.
I don't know that the front door ever really has to be limited to legal. To go back to that Navin screen of Okta apps that I have to
Hmm.
go to. Maybe there just needs to be one app that I always start with, and it starts with a C. So that could be fun. We should talk. Maybe there's a cool implementation one day that you'll do. And of course, Pamela Carter, fractional general counsel, as in she's really GC times 100 at this point. So if you like stress, be a GC to multiple industries and clients simultaneously. Thank you for Pam for carving some time out of your busy schedule. I'm hoping that you'll bring your in-house counsel expertise, the reality of the legal teams that you work with, how they're navigating with AI or not. I'm sure we'll learn soon enough that many teams are also kind of let's wait and see, or we're scared, or we tried it last year and it didn't work out, so we're now anti AI. We get that in all tech implementations as well, right? So we're here to talk about some real tactical stuff here, challenges legal is facing. We're going to cover four topics, and we're going to try to cover all four topics in a lot of detail. As we're talking, don't forget, and I misspoke earlier in the fireside chat, it is not the chat function. There's a Q&A function in Zoom. So submit your questions through there, and we'll try to answer them as we go along as well. So let's get started. Let's talk about agentic AI in legal. I kind of almost have beef with the term, but I think everyone kind of knows it's AI that takes some sort of action. What are the opportunities and challenges we have with oversight as well. So really interesting stuff. Josh, if you could just tell the audience real quick, what's the real capability of agentic AI here? Like, what's it going to do for me?
Yeah, depending on the problem you're trying to solve, there's different answers. But what I have seen the best use cases for is really alleviating administrative or mundane work.
Hmm.
That's
No,
where it
that
seems like legal professionals just love it.
I like it. And I apologize because I got excited and I jumped actually to our second topic, but to stay on this before we circle back to it, is I sound so corporate. Circle back, yes. The mundane work, right? I think with legal teams, we always like to act that everything is hyper complex and it's in our nature a little bit, but we do get slammed with a lot of really straightforward, boring, mundane work that if we're honest, we don't like doing because we want to negotiate that big complex contract or do that big regulatory push if maybe our company is lobbying for a change and that's where we need to be spending our time. And so kind of automating that into oblivion is, well, the person asking for it hopefully still gets a result, but me not
Hmm.
having to do it is really powerful. So let's go back to our actual first topic, from principles to practice, operationalizing AI governance. Kanan, I'd like to go with you. We talk, there's a lot of talk about AI fairness, transparency, accountability, kind of governance around usage as well in this space, especially coming from legal teams, right? You know, so beyond these high level frameworks, what does operationalizing AI governance actually look like for legal teams today? Or what should it look like, I suppose?
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me here, Navin. And I've been listening to the conversation, the fireside chat between Josh and you, and really, really inspiring to see the use cases that are emerging. And very quickly, I'll also say about the legal education and how, we are looking at creating future ready professionals. So the legal skills that we are imparting in the law schools now, are they going to be relevant in 2 years or 5 years time? And that's
Hmm.
really an open conversation, and definitely something that we need to start thinking more solidly about. Coming
Hmm.
back to the question that you asked about operationalizing the AI governance, and breaking down the big values such as transparency and accountability that we all have, and many organizations and law firms have started to bring that more and more into the conversation. And of course, they are important, right? At the end of the day, these big values, or what the
Hmm.
organization stands for, or what you commit to, you cannot take that away. In fact, even with the EU AI Act, the UNESCO's 10 principles of responsible AI have been at the at the basis, or at like the main platform on which all of that has been created. But
Hmm.
at the end of the day, as you said in the introduction also, Navin, um, I mean, if these big principles are not really addressing a Tuesday afternoon question of can I just use Chat GPT to simplify this complex document, or can I
Hmm.
summarize this particular text using the freely available AI platform or not, somebody in the organization having that question, how are these big principles going to address that? So, unless and until it is operationalized and broken into the intake form, for example, what Josh was mentioning, or creating like the prompt libraries, or creating, a fundamental culture within the organization. Of course, the lesser change management conversation, the better. But at the end of the day,
Hmm.
AI is also constantly evolving. Even the tool that you are using are constantly incorporating newer
Yeah.
features. So, in a way, are you kind of looking at AI governance as one compliance checkbox, or are you looking at
Hmm.
it as a living playbox, or as a living playbook for the
Hmm.
organization to constantly keep coming back to, making iterations? So that is a culture question, to be honest, but that is something that is absolutely necessary, rather than just treating that as a compliance requirement. So that would be really my answer to your question as to how to
Hmm.
operationalize that.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, just the technology in just the last year has changed. Maybe we don't necessarily see the UI that we're using changing, but the underlying there's much more capability. And then there's that whole issue about do I use my own data to train the model and all that stuff. And so I think it is exactly what you said, Kanan. It's a living, breathing document, so to speak, not just a one and done that you check because you may roll out AI and then AI will change over the course of, the next 3 years, and you will have to adapt to that as well. Josh, how does Checkbox support, governance like this? When you're thinking about I'm using an AI tool like yours and
Hmm.
I need visibility. I need to know what's going on. Could you tell us a bit about how your team supports your customers in this?
Yeah, I hear a lot of times there's like the big concern around like hallucinations, which happens
Hmm.
all the time, where stuff just gets made up. And, some attorneys learned the hard way when they reference cases that weren't real to the judge. What Checkbox really does to solve for that is we keep it in a closed environment. So when
Hmm.
AI is leveraged in our product, it will only ever respond or provide answers or information or routing based on the specific source materials that legal has
Hmm.
provided. So it's already information that has been vetted, that's been approved.
Hmm.
And so it's not going out to the internet and just figuring out what's there. It will only ever act specifically upon the configuration that the legal team has set up.
Yeah. I like that. That's actually one of the first things I've seen people just lock out kind of internet data from
Hmm.
their large language model because you get far fewer hallucinations when it's just my stuff that it's kind of looking through when I prompt something, right? So I think that's really cool. For the panel and any one of you really, if you want to jump in, otherwise I'll just keep talking myself as well. But when you think about governance, right, we tend to focus on what the legal team wants. And, how do you scale that across an entire organization? So I think, Kanan, you mentioned, but like just people using AI tools willy-nilly, part of me goes, okay, I know that I can't control my individual employees. If they decide they want to upload something into ChatGPT, they're not supposed to. It wouldn't be the first time I'm sure something like this has happened. From a governance framework, uh, is there anything beyond discipline that organizations can kind of do to, help protect their data just being loaded up into publicly available tools?
I'd love to jump in at this point,
Yes,
and I
please
would,
go ahead, Pam.
yeah, from having launched a an AI governance team and program and policy, it comes down to communication and training, making sure that everyone across the organization is aware of the expectations around AI
Hmm.
usage. And when we say AI, I mean, you touched on it. There's a agentic AI, Gen AI, large language models. There's all sorts of different types of
Hmm.
AI tools and use cases. And when you develop a governance program that's across the organization, you need a really, really cross-functional team for that input. Uh,
Yeah.
I've developed policies, and then we created things like approved list of tools for use.
Hmm.
We educated employees about the risks of using um, open models as opposed to the closed models, and
Yeah.
process for seeking approval for new tools.
Hmm.
Rather than everybody running out and doing their own thing on ChatGPT, have an enterprise ChatGPT
Hmm.
where you can protect it, you can control it,
Yeah.
have other forms um, of AI tools that are enterprise level. Because I think when AI first kind of started picking up steam, everyone was running out and buying their own tools,
Hmm.
and with no controls and no guidance. So, from my perspective, communication, training, awareness really helps to solve
Hmm.
a lot of problems.
That makes a lot of sense. I really like the idea of just have your own in-house tool that people can kind of safely play with. If you just, or I mean, I suppose some organizations do adopt kind of a zero AI policy, at least until they're ready, right? And so that, practically speaking, can be hard to control. But that's the same thing as, oh, if I have Salesforce or I have AgileOps, well, what if someone decides to work outside the system? The truth is they can. And you just have to handle that on a case by case basis. There's always going to be, I think, the fear of the bad actors. Like, well, that'll happen, but then you handle it just like you do any other disciplinary issue, I suppose. But from a governance standpoint, we talk about it as, yes, there's the policies around how we use AI. I definitely, from my perspective, I also think about accountability, right? Who is accountable for the AI, for using that AI output? And I think that's something that doesn't get talked about enough, where, we've heard the horror stories, usually around research. Attorney use AI, hallucinated a bunch of, case citations. They didn't check it. And then, predictably problems arose from that, right? But at the end of the day, that the attorney is accountable. They can't just blame the tool. And so I think that is very important, like kind of defining who is accountable in what instances you're accountable for AI use. And I think, Josh, you touched on this as well, but just with hallucinations and a kind of governing the actual use of AI to make it effective, we have things like audit trails, right? And that's something that's available within Checkbox too, where I can understand how its AI came to a particular conclusion or made a particular decision to act on, right? All right, I see you nodding. So yes, it's exactly that. I think that piece, the auditability piece, where that, because I think, and Pam, I'm curious about when you've seen the different legal teams you've worked, the ones that use AI, there are obviously going to be the occasional hallucinations, and I think sometimes it kind of gets overplayed. But when they see hallucinations, is it fairly common to go, we need to understand the methodology of how that hallucination occurred? Is it an issue with the model, or is it just a training issue, a bad prompt? Is that something you see?
Yeah, and I can say it can be either or both. It can be a bad prompt. It can
Hmm.
be a failure in a tool. Ultimately, the attorney or whomever is the user in the legal team is responsible for that output, regardless of where it came from. So the terminology of human in the loop is so
Hmm.
very important. We hear horror stories of attorneys who have gone into court, filed motions, filed pleadings, and getting eviscerated by a judge because they never checked those pleadings. It is absolutely critical, though you can rely on AI tools for efficiency
Hmm.
to help make your job easier. When you have an output, whether that's in a contract, you've redlined a contract, you've used tools to redline, to review,
Hmm.
make sure you check it. You're still gaining process efficiencies. You're still gaining time, but
Hmm.
you're ultimately responsible. But I would say, back to your question, it can be a prompt issue. It can be a tool issue. Your
Hmm.
outputs are only as good as your playbook. Josh talked about a playbook. If you
Yep.
don't have a good
Hmm.
playbook, if you don't have good pre-approved forms, templates, clause libraries, and the like, the output is not going to be accurate. It's not going to be valuable to you.
Yeah. No, thank you, Pam. I think, as we move on to our next topic, or rather go back to that topic, Josh and I I started us on the wrong foot. So I'll take accountability for that. I can't blame AI. But in summary, I think, what I hear all of you say is that when you think about building your own governance policy, yes, it's going to be based on usage, what can and cannot be done. But it's not just a single point in time. You have to manage your policy, and that policy also has to include, the kinds of tools you're willing to use, the kinds of data that you're willing to allow access to or to upload. And, I think certain technology requirements for your AI vendors as well. We will only use vendors with auditability, where I can understand how, or my administrators can understand, because the salesperson isn't going to like try to audit the
Mhm.
AI. They just complain about the outcome. But just the administrators being able, our internal administrators can see that audit trail to determine what was going on, and your training policies and employee onboarding policies as well, so that they understand both the benefits, the how-tos, and the risks of using AI as well, and where they're accountable. So it's something that I think is going to continue to evolve, right, everyone? It's still a fairly novel tool. Not everyone is just using AI in a mainstream way, although AI has gone mainstream. And when I say everyone, I mean people in legal, everyone in our audience here. So let's switch back to agentic AI and legal. Josh, I know you kind of laid out non-disclosure, like simpler tools,
Mhm.
simpler use cases like an NDA, or serving a Q&A function. We talked in the fireside chat as well about just triage and smart routing, or kind of guided submissions, right, where you send stuff in. Uh, can you drop like maybe one more example around agentic AI and how it can help legal teams? Is email one of them?
Yeah, like here's another example that I see that people really light up for like subpoenas, let's say, or service of
Hmm.
process requests. Those come in, and traditionally, I mean,
Hmm.
you have to read through it, you have to process it, you have to fill in a bunch of fields, you have to kick off. Well, AI can do a lot of that for you. It can go through and
Hmm.
extract that information. It can tag the fields. It can notify the appropriate parties. In fact, it can
Hmm.
even connect with certain registered agents where the registered agent handles that. They just forward it into a mailbox, and then AI can route, triage, and process all of it. But it does go back to
Yeah.
what Pam mentioned. Like you have to have the playbooks. You
Yes.
have to. It, it's a tool at the end of the day, and it's a very configurable tool. But if you set it up the right way, then it will act accordingly, and it will
Hmm.
eliminate having to have someone manually read every single service or process request and send it where it needs to go, for example.
I love that. I think that's the message we end this. I know it feels, audience, like we're breezing through this topic quickly, but we kind of front-ended, and now we're concluding it as well. So, having the right playbook, having everything built out, how you want the AI to handle it is key, right, Josh, is what I'm hearing you
Hmm.
say. And I think that's important. But it's worth doing, because the gains and the efficiency you get from spending some time to really document your process, your criteria, will pay huge dividends when it's fully automated away. Uh, I know that I'm always thankful to have to sift through fewer emails, because who's going to read my spam if I have to like 50 work emails as well? So well, let's shift our focus, everyone, to, everyone's favorite topic around AI, right? Privacy, data protection, the changing world of regulations. I think especially let's focus on, the pesky GDPR and CCPA. I know the EMEA audience members here are familiar with some of this for sure. Not all of us in the US are, but just for clarity, basically, I'll sum it up as lots of data restriction. What can you upload? What can you use? What can you move around? And the answer is not a lot, right? It's a lot of governance and restriction around that. Kannan, if I can come to you, about data requirements, consent management for AI powered tools. How are you seeing legal education adapting with all these privacy considerations?
No, this is really key because at the end of the
Mhm.
day, as the technology is moving, the regulations around it is also moving very fast. And
Mhm.
it is so interesting that on one hand, people are saying that AI is taking away the jobs of the legal professionals. But on the other hand, if you see the number of billable hours or the work of the lawyers,
Mhm.
it is increasing precisely. One of the strong reasons is the tech regulation that is coming up and the
Yeah.
compliance requirements that are coming into the tables of, the legal practitioners. So this is a very key requirement, and law firms, law schools across the world are now more and more
Mhm.
aware of these realities of incorporating some of these regulations into the curriculum so that students are prepared when they join the workforce. And even within the organization, this is having a clear impact, right? Because the legal team is being involved much earlier than before, because the moment you are supposed to
Yeah.
be reviewing a vendor, you'll have to start thinking, okay, are they compliant to the GDPR or the AI Act, or possibly even the Digital Service Act or the CCPA, as you mentioned, in different jurisdictions. So
Mhm.
that means that the legal team's work is kind of multiplying in more than one ways, because privacy
Yeah.
is again not a checkbox. It's a layered conversation now, looking at data
Mhm.
minimization, looking at the transparency obligations, and also the human in the loop that Pamela mentioned. So all of this will come into the conversation all at once, and
Mhm.
that's how, again, legal team is more like a design partner now, than just a compliance team, or just looking at the legal requirements. So the training, or again, having those conversations within the organization become
Mhm.
more critical, so that everybody is aware as to what is developing in the marketplace. Things are changing so fast. These are very new
Mhm.
tools also, as you mentioned, Naveen. So we are all figuring it out together. Sometimes when I talk to the tech teams, they are more into this mindset of, okay, I'm trying to solve this, it's not being solved by me, can you try? And perhaps the legal
Mhm.
teams also will have to start bringing that mindset and the approach to work, saying, okay, maybe I'm not able to solve it, can we try to solve this together? And that's more open and transparent.
Yeah, no, no, thank you, Kanan. I know it's with these regulations, you always feel like you're playing catch up, and the risk is real, right? Because we're not talking about just, oh, my bad, I'm sorry, we uploaded the wrong data or protected data. It's, fines, it's, legal action, it's reputational harm, and so this is, I think, a really, really important space. And in a way, I think you're right. There's a whole area of law now that has developed around AI. And before I come to you, Pam, on some of this, but it's just there's a whole area of law developing around AI, which really kind of it's technology in general, right? But so the attorneys definitely have a lot of work. I think those of us that want to specialize in AI and data privacy. So if any of you are thinking about expanding your practice scope, that's something that is really popular these days. If you haven't noticed, Pam, if I could come to you, we've been talking a lot about compliance with data privacy, and then of course in healthcare we've got protected health information and all that. Can you share with us? And I'm going to do the same thing I did to Josh earlier. I want to hear a terrible, sad, bad story that everyone was unhappy about too. But let's start on the positive. Can you kind of share with the audience maybe a recent compliance win around AI? What you guys did to kind of get things squared away.
Yeah, and I just want to comment on
Mhm.
something
Please.
Kanan had said. And when she said legal becomes a design partner, and I really love that because it is really critical for legal to be in that role in terms of designing compliance programs in an AI world, right? A reminder to everyone, the privacy laws that exist apply to
Mhm.
an AI world as well. And while regulations are changing rapidly, they're not changing in some key jurisdictions because there's a desire to create an environment to increase innovation, right? So there's a concern about throttling innovation. So it's something that you have to constantly monitor. But
Mhm.
all existing privacy regulations apply to an AI
Yep.
world. In terms of recent wins, I can also share some cautionary tales, but I would say um, data mapping. I think this is one of those exercises that a lot of teams really struggle with. Where does your data reside? If you got a delete me request, do you know where all of that data resides? Does it reside in a
Mhm.
bunch of disparate systems? Does it reside on people's laptops? How are you going to delete that data with any kind of assurance if you don't know where that data resides? So I undertook a data mapping exercise and found a ready, willing, and able partner within the organization who helped develop some of our own internal AI capabilities to do that data mapping exercise. So my advice here is that as you're looking to solve a pain point of any kind, uh, look to your internal resources as well. Find a cross-functional partner. Find somebody who might be able to help you on that project, or whether it's to identify an outside vendor or an external tool. But really working within the business, finding those business partners who can work with you. So we developed in really, I will say, record time in my experience, a data mapping program and sort of structure that actually amazed me. But I did that by reaching out and working with others across the organization.
No, thank you, Pam. I kind of always, with well, actually, you know what? Before I just ramble on about my impressions on data privacy, I'd like to go to you, Josh, because I'm sure you get this question a lot from, compliance officers, legal CLOs and GCs, and probably InfoSec heads as well at your customers. But how does Checkbox kind of help your customers stay in compliance with regulations like this? Are on the back end, I'm sure there's some interesting stuff that happens. Could you share a little bit with the audience? Give us a sneak peek.
Yeah, I would say this is a good point too, because with AI now, software can be created a lot quicker. So every day I swear there's a new legal tech company that pops up
Hmm.
because there's a very low barrier of entry now. But when push comes to shove, yeah, behind the scenes there is a lot of compliance that's required. So one of the things like Checkbox does, and I would encourage this for any provider you're looking at, we actually have a trust site where we will post all of that different certification and compliance, like SOC 2s, ISO certifications, what are our internal policies, procedures, encryption, like all of that is documented and readily
Hmm.
available to any prospects or customers. Because while from the front it might look nice and pretty, but what's going on like behind the scenes? Like, are all the doors
Hmm.
open and anyone can get in? So that's something that we do, is we provide all that. We have audits, we have annual like penetration tests, like all of that's
Hmm.
happening. I would make sure that whomever you're looking at, that
Hmm.
they also have that. Because with a lot of new companies that have backings and need to grow, like that is a lot of work to get all of
Yeah.
that infrastructure in place internally, but it doesn't, pay the bill. So I
Mhm.
could see that kind of being a low priority for maybe newer solutions that are out there trying to get out the door quicker. So that's what I would say. Make sure they have a trust site and they have all of that independently verified.
I really like that. I think I know from my perspective, if I were to put my software customer hat on, I would love if my own software vendors could offer me guidance, because I don't know everything, or I may not be an AI expert. My area of expertise might be oil and gas, or
Hmm.
agriculture, and I don't have the time to grapple with every single thing, or bring someone in. So vendor can help. I'm sure like or vendor partners, consulting firms with a lot of
Yep.
experience and deep domain expertise. So if you don't have that expertise in-house, I think bringing it from the outside is definitely kind of the way to go. Whether that's, I think, a GC like you, Pam, or, Josh, you and the Checkbox team, I think that can be really the right direction, especially if I think time is of the essence. It's sometimes you got to choose between spending the effort and the cost to kind of build up this expertise in-house versus just get it from someone else. I don't know how to build cars. I just buy them. So yeah, that's my metaphor for this. So let's go to our final topic, everyone. So, we talk about building trust, transparency. So I want to stay with you, Josh, but you know, when you think about trust around getting the trust of legal teams, really, uh, especially when they have questions around we kind of talked about this a little bit, how the AI came to this conclusion, or why are you giving me this answer? And especially if there's AI in the loop as well, you know, how are you and the checkbox team, Josh, helping legal teams kind of manage that type of risk through your tool, flagging things and whatnot?
Yeah, a lot of it comes back to the data behind the requests and the answers you take is all of the data is available. There are audit trails, there are dashboards that you can then go back and review and adjust and tweak and change the sources and the prompts and the language.
Mhm.
It's not anything that's hidden behind the scenes or oh, only actually us as the vendor. We're the only ones that can actually make that change. You have to come to us every time. The way that we look at it is like this is something that legal should own and operate and have full control and transparency of. So all of it
Mhm.
is readily available behind the scenes to those administrators, of course.
All right. All right. No, very good. And Kanan, if I could go to you as we kind of start wrapping this up as well. Uh, you know, how do you recommend people kind of explain AI assisted work to non-technical stakeholders? Really, I think in clients, leadership, the courts, even, what works, or what have you seen work, and do you advise people in education as well?
No, this is very important. And since AI
Mhm.
is so much into the conversation everywhere, but at the end of the day, the mistake that we do here is that we start with technology and we start to say, okay, this is the model, this is the technology, these are
Mhm.
the parameters, etc. And honestly, we kind of confuse people in the terminology so much that they actually want to know, be it the clients or the leadership or even the courts, as to, okay, can I really trust this outcome? Can I really
Mhm.
understand what the role of the AI was in this? What did a human do? And who's going to be responsible, or where is the accountability, as you earlier mentioned, Navin? So the framework, somewhere I feel like the question that you need to ask is, okay, what did AI do? What did a human do? And how do we know that it's right and trustworthy? So at the end of the day, when you answer these questions correctly, in simple language and addressing their
Mhm.
questions in the way that they would like to get answered, that's what really works at the end of the day. And honestly, if you can't answer these questions about your
Mhm.
workflow and about explaining AI assisted work to them, that also means that you need improvement in the AI governance that you've built up, or you need to simplify the process further. Bringing something in
Mhm.
the plain language isn't really dumbing it down, but it is the clarity with which you communicate with them, and the clarity that you also have about yourself and the processes that you've built internally. So I guess that really works. Simplification is clarity.
Thank you, Kanan. And Pam, let's close with you, really. I think, can you tell us, maybe about a proactive step uh, you've taken, or teams you've worked have taken, to kind of, ensure human readable logs of AI decisions? I know that's really important to a lot of organizations. I don't know that they always read it as diligently as they should, right? But it is critical from a governance standpoint. Can you end us on that, and share with the audience?
I sure can. You want to be able, everything needs to be auditable. And so you need to be able to look back, and it doesn't have to be like an annual audit type of thing, but you need to be able to see how a decision was reached, where the AI decision making took place in that log. And a lot of that is really embedded in the various tools that we talked about today, whether that's Checkbox, whether it's Agiloft, whether it's some other tool. That audit trail is so important when you get a customer request. So if you are a vendor and you're responding to a customer request, being
Hmm.
able to show that audit trail is key. I also want to mention one other thing that I've encountered, and I think a lot of in-house counsel has encountered, are blanket prohibitions and contracts on the use of AI to provide services or various products. So a customer says, you represent warrant that you won't use AI to provide the services in this MSA. I don't know of many companies that can agree to that in good conscience. because AI is embedded in so many different things.
Yeah.
My advice there is to just use it as an opportunity to educate the other party about how you're using AI and what you're using it for, and importantly, what you're not using it for. You're not training outside models, and it really goes to Kanan's comment about making sure it's you simplify the message, making sure you can speak a language that others understand.
Fantastic. Pam, Kanan, Josh, thank you so much for joining us. You can now go off and relax, have a cup of coffee or lunch. I know I'm starting to get hungry myself, but while I introduce our next speaker, so again, thank you so much. And audience, please, connect with them on LinkedIn if you have any follow-up questions that you didn't get to ask today as well. Thank you all. All right, everyone, let's move on to our next session. So, a speaker that I'm about to introduce comes with a pretty, some beefy credentials. She has more than 21 years experience as a legal executive at one of the most highly regulated institutions in the world. I happen to know this firsthand myself. Was one of my first jobs with this company that I don't put on my resume. But and so just seeing how enterprise AI governance gets built on scale. So I'd like to introduce Sophia S. Rahman. She is the principal at GCA General Counsel Advisory, which is a firm specializing in advisory services for enterprise organizations navigating what is really a complex network of AI and emerging technology and regulatory risk as well. Prior to founding GCA, Sophia spent that 21 years at Citi. Some of us still call it Citibank, but and most recently as global general counsel for intellectual property and AI and emerging technology. So I think I've said enough about how Sophia knows a lot about this space. So I'm ready to sit back and learn along with the rest of you as well. So the title for today's session with Sophia is The Agents in the Room. How's that for cool, right? When your legal ops stack starts acting on its own. So we're going to explore what legal leaders need to consider when these AI systems start acting with autonomy. We talked about agentic AI both at the fireside chat and here. And so, Sophia, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to now shut my mouth and let you tell us a bit about this topic.
Terrific. Well, thank you, Navin, for the introduction, and to Techsommet for having me here. I'm very pleased to be here. And there's so many different ways to approach this. And it was really a conundrum for me to think about, what do I want to get across in a 15-minute conversation? And of course, that means we're not going to, rather than giving you like a deep dive on one particular issue, I thought maybe it would be good for folks to talk a little bit about agentic AI and what's coming, if you haven't already started to see it in your own organizations. So let's start with scene setting. Somewhere in your company today, software is sending emails and modifying records and signing off on decisions that a regulator will attribute to your company. And oh, I'm sorry for interrupting here, but Dan, that's actually the old version that you're sharing. If you could perhaps pull up the other, I can keep talking, but if you could pull up the other version that you got this morning.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. All right, so that's the scene setting, and that's where I wanted to start, because the playbooks that most of us are still running are, in fact, the familiar playbooks about AI as a tool. And it, of course, involves building for software that you've procured, that you've deployed, that you've overseen. It includes, for example, traditional activities such as vendor due diligence, contractual reps and warranties, and bias and fairness reviews. But now we're starting to look at what happens if you're using AI as an actor, what's actually being deployed. And the real issues are around the fact that the AI is persisting across sessions And it's also delegating to other agents. It's taking action before across the systems, but it's also acting before anyone can look, let alone approve. And that's where we start to see on the next slide, we start to see where the framework is actually starting to become strained. Because the assumption that we've always relied on and we've identified an accountable principle, short and sweet. That's the assumption, and it's the bedrock assumption that we've acted under. And whether it's agency, contractual law, employment, et cetera. And with the multi-agent systems, what we're starting to see is that it's putting pressure on every one of these areas of law. And there's three specific pressure points. The first is distributed delegation. So an orchestrator is handing off to a sub-agent, to several sub-agents, maybe to a vendor sub-agents, and you don't even have visibility into who those people are, or those companies and their agents. But who is the principal? The second is persistent memory. So these systems remember. You can see this in your own personal use of AI. Now you can use persistent memory. It's been turned on, and you can turn it on or off depending on the LLM that you're using. Now, what that really also it sort of feeds into the observation that what you put in as persistent memory a few months ago may be used, and it may not be correct, it may not be appropriate, but it's being retained, and persistent memory is being used to shape a decision today. And then the third area is autonomous tool use. So agents can transact. I mean, they're moving quickly once they've been deployed, and they can transact, they can send, they can modify before anyone in the loop can react. So let's talk a little bit about NIST. And NIST is immensely important. And I wanted to really spend a moment on sharing with you this timeline that shows that in 3 years, NIST has been incredibly active. They were active before 2023 with Gen AI, with AI ML. But in 2023, they actually created an AI risk framework where they're talking about these foundations with governing, mapping, measuring, and managing. And if you're not familiar with it, I also gave the references so you can pull up the frameworks and the profiles. And certainly, I think the Gen AI profile is a particularly interesting one because in July of 2024, they actually created a catalog of 12 risks in the Gen AI space, and so I won't get into it here. I'll flash it on screen in a moment. But I also wanted to share with you and call out the Center for AI Standards and Innovation. So in January of 2026, that was just launched. And I'm going to take a step back and explain why does this matter to you individually as lawyers, chief legal officers, legal professionals in your space. And the short answer is that yes, the NIST frameworks are not required, they're not binding law, but they're of course they're voluntary, they're consensus-based risk management frameworks, but they can become binding or quasi-binding, not just the moment a regulator or a contract or an institutional client or a board requires alignment, but the moment that it's integrated into a law, rule, or regulation as well. So voluntary doesn't mean it's irrelevant. It means it's the standard by which our judgment may in future be evaluated, and it's good. It's good for you to have a line of sight into the development of the laws, rules, and regulations. By the way, not just in the US, because it's international. So there is an interplay, for example, between OECD principles, which were in turn incorporated into the EU AI Act. And then and it goes back and forth, both it's two directional. So it also involves, for example, NIST bringing in the principles from OECD and from the EU AI Act and calling those out and integrating them into how they're looking at their frameworks and their profiles. So the reason I call out now the AI Agent Standards Initiative is because this is really happening right now. So this month and next month, meaning this week and next week, NIST is actually hosting some sector-specific listening sessions around the AI Agent Standards Initiative, and that includes financial services as one of the three sectors. The initiative is built on three pillars: industry-led agent standards, community-led open source agent protocols, and my personal favorite is research into AI agent security and identity. Because, I mean, we won't get into it here, that'll kind of blow everything up in terms of our timeline time. But I do think that's if you're interested in one part of NIST's activities, I would tell you watch this space, because this is something I personally was involved in for the last few years with specifically not just Gen AI, but specifically when I'm talking about agentic AI, we're talking about the protocols, we're talking about the identity, we're talking about security. So this is a very meaty place to delve into, and you don't have to do a lot. Just follow them and see how things are developing. It'll give you a good line of sight into what's coming next. So this is a slide that shows the risk picture today. It's pulled. These are the 12 risks that were pulled from the Gen AI profile of NIST, and it also shows the 5 risks that are changing exposure for multi-agent systems. And I won't get into these individually. I urge you to take a quick look at what they are in more detail. But I think these 5, the tool supply chain, the trust escalation, the delegation for an attribution failure, the cascading action for the time gap between action and discovery, memory poisoning, that's a significant, I mean, they're all significant. So it's definitely something if this is an area that you are responsible for, you can, delve into it, or you can share this with your colleagues. But definitely, I think these are definitely an area where what you're getting is not just today. You're getting, as I said, you're getting a little bit of a line of sight into how regulators and legislators are looking at the future specific to agentic AI. All right, so let's now turn for a moment to the ecosystem of roles. Every function, when I'm looking at the ecosystem of roles in any organization, every function sees one piece. But agentic AI does not respect silos. It crosses borders. And that's why governance built under a single silo will fail. Because if agentic AI is crossing borders and it's not respecting these silos, the fact is that all the functions must be present and collaborating with clearly defined roles within the system. And so let me give you an example of how that was happening when I was at Citi. So we did exactly that. We actually built a governance process that was blessed at the highest levels. And we were working as I always called it an ecosystem. There was myself as the responsible person for all of legal. There was one person that was responsible for all of compliance, all of model risk, risk, technology, et cetera, et cetera. So there were single points of contact. And then that ecosystem was, we could then tap into people in different parts of that ecosystem to delve deeper for particular issues, and then also pull together working groups as needed for specific delegated action issues or groups. So we were for that, and that's why I was actually building and reforming the institution, not just doing my day job with focusing on IP and AI. It was a lot of work, but it was also rewarding, and it was a lot of fun because we were building, we were collaborating, probably the most collaborative uh, construct I've seen in my 21 plus years at Citi. Actually, definitely not probably, and we were successful. I mean, we enabled the access to internal AI tools across 200,000 employees globally, including Citi Stylist, Citi Assist, GitHub Copilot for Business, Microsoft Copilot, and June of last year, Devin for Agentic AI. After 3 years of building and grappling with these AI and agentic AI governance through Citi's responsible AI lens, the process became more routine, and that's when I moved on and I left Citi earlier this month. So let's talk a little bit. Let's turn to some questions that you can ask your teams going forward after this program. And the reality is, you don't need a new framework. You need to walk in and ask what happens today. So for example, with agents, which agents act on your behalf? And specifically, read only is one risk that we face with agents, but there's risks specific to writing, specific to sending, specific to deleting, and specific to executing. So we need to, each organization needs to get a handle on what is it that the agents are permitted to do, and how are they acting on your behalf. The second is, who is the principal? That can be a thorny question, really. And again, this is in the ecosystem of not just the vendors and the second party, of course, third party, fourth party. So you need to understand who is the principal and can you defend that? Then the third question is, what's our discovery posture? So we're looking at logs, attribution, chain of custody. Assume that a regulator or plaintiff is going to ask. You need to have, or internal audit, you need to have a crisp and well-formulated discovery posture. You bring in e-discovery, litigation, et cetera, and you bring in all the principles that are part of your AI ecosystem. And then finally, you're looking for number 4, you're looking at which of our contracts are actually assuming our decisions are being made by humans. So, for example, counterparty consent, fiduciary duties. I mean, that's, again, this is why it needs to be collaborative, because the answers are not within silos. This spans so many different parts of every organization. Then there's considerations for you as the attendees, as you're thinking about it from your individual perspectives. And there's 3 priorities that I would suggest for the next 30 days around inventory, contracts, and tabletop. None of them, by the way, require additional headcount. All of them can start next week. The first is building an agent inventory. So what does each agent actually do? And remember, what each agent does today is not necessarily what it could do next week or next month or 3 months from now as the models are changing. It used to be every 90 days. It seems, certainly these days, it seems to me like it's faster than every 90 days for a variety of reasons. So you really want to understand, similar to with the EU AI Act, you do the model inventory But you can't be, it's not one and done. You need to continue to have line of sight into how those models are evolving. Similarly, you need line of sight into how the agents are evolving. What do they do today? What are the tools it can call? What is the data it can write to? Who's the principal? And how reversible are its actions? And what logs do you actually have? And how quickly can you access those logs? That's actually surprisingly, that question doesn't align necessarily with your expectations. And then secondly, with the agentic in the vendor contracts, talking about tool chain transparency, log retention, specific log retention that's specific to the agent activity, indemnification for agent initiated harm, audit rights scoped to the agent behavior, and termination triggers if the underlying model is swapped. And then third, running a tabletop, a simulated walkthrough on the highest risk agent. So it's really around walking through what could go wrong operationally, contractually, with regulators, and in discovery if the highest authority agent does the worst thing it can do tomorrow. Those gaps become your roadmap. So in closing, corporate counsel is helping to build the law and the governance of multi-agent systems. The standards are being drafted right now, and they'll shape the regulatory expectations and the litigation theories for years to come. Lawyers who engage early will help write the language and collaborate with every function to help their organizations succeed. Thank you.
That was amazing, Sophia. Thank you so much. It definitely made me realize I have a heck of a lot to learn, but I'm pretty sure a lot of the audience was screenshotting that 12 plus 5 risk slide to just print out or at least send to a couple of colleagues, because I know I was. And of course, my ears picked up immediately when you mentioned contracts, given that's what I get obsessed with. But renegotiating the correct provisions into your AI vendor contracts, taking an inventory. I was thinking to myself, the one thing I'd want to pull out from this, but the whole thing was great. So thank you so much for joining us. And audience, of course, you can find Sophia on LinkedIn as well if you have additional follow-up questions. Again, thank you, Sophia, for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. Take
All right.
care.
You're welcome.
Bye all.
Bye-bye. All right. And now our next and final speaker, and actually I have a surprise for all of you at the end because, Sophia mentioning that, renegotiating your vendor contracts and, all that fun stuff. I might have a little giveaway to help those of you that are thinking of doing that as well. But forget about that for now because our next speaker actually is surprise, surprise, also bringing real depth of domain experience in legal leadership, risk, and strategic decision making. So please, everyone, join me in welcoming Patricia Astorga. Patricia, you can call me out if I said your name wrong. I do apologize. But Patricia is the Chief Legal Officer at Mintz Group, and her session is titled From Shadow AI to Strategic Intelligence, Governing Responsible AI in a Future-Ready Legal Function. So I know I am really interested to hear what you have to say, Patricia. So I'm going to do my traditional Navin shut up and let you present to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Navin.
Yeah.
And thank you to Techsommet for bringing together such a thoughtful conversation today. So as we close AI and legal, transforming the future of legal ops, I want to focus on where all of today's themes converge, and that is governance, trust, and leadership. So my goal in the next few minutes will be to connect what we've heard about AI, risk, and compliance into a clear leadership framework for legal operations. And that's what I hope you will walk away with after today's session. I'll begin by setting the stage. Where are we now, and where are we going with AI in legal ops? Next, I'll define shadow AI. And third, I'll explore what a future-ready legal operations looks like. Fourth, I'll discuss governance, risk, and responsible AI. And finally, I'll close with what leadership, learning, and institutional advantage AI can deliver when used responsibly. So one thing is clear, AI is here. It's already embedded in all of our legal work. That experimentation phase is behind us. It's no longer emerging technology. It has arrived. So what matters now is how we govern, scale, and trust AI. So for legal departments, the question isn't even whether AI belongs in legal. That question has been answered, right? The question for us is whether AI will operate in the shadows, informally and inconsistently, or whether it will be a strategic governed capability that strengthens our legal operations. So why does this conversation matter? And why does it matter now? Well, because the cost of inaction is one that we can't afford. Shadow AI use, inconsistent AI adoption, all of the horror stories that you've heard about today have landed many organizations in hot water. Every day, you see another organization in the headlines for shadow AI use. And it matters at this moment because this represents for us a transition point. This is where legal operations can be proactive and define the standards for responsible AI use. This is where we shift from reacting to incidents, regulatory scrutiny, judicial reprimand, and reputational harm. So how is AI being used? AI is already embedded in legal work, from document review to contract processes to compliance monitoring and reporting. And the more that AI is used, the greater the risk for exposures and errors. I want to take a moment to define shadow AI, to set the stage. When we talk about shadow AI, we mean that informal or unapproved AI use that sits outside of the authorized and vetted workflow. So it's not about bad actors, it's not about careless professionals, but it's about a governance gap. Because we know, and we are learning the hard way, that bans do not stop shadow AI. Silence doesn't stop shadow AI. But what does? Responsible enablement. That's what will get us ahead of shadow AI. So if we define shadow AI as the informal, unapproved, or unsanctioned use of AI tools outside the established legal and organizational governance structures, then what does that mean for legal operations? Well, this means that in legal ops, you have shadow AI when professionals are facing that pressure to deliver faster results without access to secure, fit-for-purpose AI tools and without clear guidance on acceptable use. That's what causes shadow AI to lurk in the background. When policies are unclear, approved tools are insufficient, or training is lacking, or all of the above. Shadow AI thrives in environments where the demand for efficiency collides with uncertainty about acceptable practices. So why is this frame important? It's important because understanding shadow AI as a systemic issue allows us to address those root causes. Why are our employees using shadow AI? Do we have a gap in the tools that we've enabled? Do we have a deficiency in workflow integration? Have we not communicated clearly enough? And when we identify the root cause, we can address them directly rather than relying on those broad prohibitions that are difficult to enforce. One thing that has become clear to all of us from this summit is that AI is not replacing lawyers. It is reshaping our capabilities, and it's reshaping the capabilities required to operate effectively in modern legal functions. So the real shift is not about headcount reduction. It's about proficiency and adaptability. AI literacy is now a core competency. But legal judgment, ethical reasoning, and accountability remain inherently human responsibilities. So while AI might strengthen our capabilities, reduce friction, accelerate insight, improve consistency, what AI is not is a substitute for professional responsibility. So what does a future-ready legal operations look like? We're going to connect AI risk and compliance to how AI is being used successfully inside legal operations today. When we talk about a future-ready legal function, we're not talking about a legal function that uses the most number of AI tools. What we are talking about is AI that is embedded directly into legal workflows in a thoughtful way, in a way that is tied to specific outcomes, in a way that is governed from the start. Future-ready legal ops integrates AI in ways that enhance consistency, visibility, and confidence without compromising trust. So how do we get there? Well, across industries, we've got some great examples. Leading organizations are currently applying AI to do various things like automating contract lifecycle workflows. That significantly reduces negotiation and execution timelines. They are applying AI-assisted review to policies and agreements to support regulator-ready compliance. They are extracting insight from unstructured legal data, what used to take hours upon hours. And now they have that insight extracted in minutes. They are scaling training and policy awareness by turning static content into dynamic, accessible learning formats. Now, none of these are experimental edge cases. So what matters here in these examples of meaningful AI use is not just that these cases reduce friction, but they strengthen legal oversight. And so the organizations that use them share three important characteristics. One, AI is embedded in the legal workflows. It's not layered on top. Two, the use cases are clearly tied to operational outcomes. And three, governance and accountability are built in from the start. So that's what a future-ready legal operations looks like. Not one that uses the most AI, but one that uses AI intentionally in a way that makes sense for the organization. So what distinguishes mature AI adoption from superficial implementation? How do you know and how do you identify an organization that has learned how to make AI work for it? Future-ready teams focus on clearly defined use cases tied to measurable outcomes. And that can include improved turnaround times, enhanced compliance visibility, reduced operational friction. Whatever the metrics are for that legal operations team, that's what they have used AI for. It may be one of those three things. It might be all of the above. But the point is there has been thoughtfulness about how to integrate AI. And so when governance is designed into these systems from the outset, we ensure that data access, decision authority, and accountability are clearly established. Governance, risk, and responsible AI. So responsible AI means governing action, not just access. It means more than just making AI tools available for anybody and everybody. Legal operations are fundamentally different from other corporate functions in adopting AI. We have a greater responsibility. And why is that? Well, it's because we operate with highly sensitive and privileged data. There is extreme regulatory and reputational exposure if AI use were to go wrong for legal and legal operations. And there are hard deadlines and escalation-driven risk. So this means that we need higher standards. How do we get there? One of the most important mindset shifts for legal leaders is this. AI maturity is not a ladder, it's a map. So different AI capabilities serve different purposes. It can be clarity, it can be analysis, it can be execution, and we heard several examples of each of these today. Maturity comes from choosing the right AI for the right job at the right risk level. And that can look different for every operations team, for every organization. So success should be measured by outcomes and not adoption metrics. We hear today about organizations that track AI use, right? How many of their employees have logged on today and used AI? I posit to you that is not the right or responsible way to measure AI progress. Attempting to adopt all forms of AI simultaneously or equating maturity with tool volume is a surefire way to fail at AI adoption. AI maturity is built through intentional choices and iterative learning. Measuring success through outcomes, whether it's improved decision quality, reduced risk exposure, or enhanced stakeholder trust, provides a much more meaningful assessment than usage statistics alone. So from data risk to action risk, as AI capabilities evolve, legal risk is shifting from concerns about data access to concerns about action and execution. This is where agentic AI comes in. When AI systems begin to initiate tasks, route matters, or influence decisions, the consequences of errors or misalignment increase significantly. The transition introduces action risk, where accountability for outcomes must be clearly defined. Because at the end of the day, the buck still stops with a human. And this is why governance frameworks need three things. One, decision thresholds. Two, escalation paths. And three, human in the loop controls. So what we have next is a handy checklist for requirements for AI in legal ops. One, maintaining traceability of prompts and outputs so decisions can be reconstructed and explained if something goes wrong. Two, closed testing environments with defined data retention and destruction protocols so that teams can evaluate AI performance using real-world data without compromising confidentiality. Three, explainability and defensibility to ensure that AI-assisted decisions can withstand regulatory, judicial, or stakeholder scrutiny. And finally, a good balance of innovation with trust. And again, this is where this aspect looks different for every legal operations in every organization. And this is what requires those hard conversations and that thoughtfulness about what responsible AI looks like for us. So I'll pause here for one important reality check. Organizations often experience a short-term productivity dip when adopting AI. It's worth noting here that that learning curve is normal, but we see many organizations stop when it becomes uncomfortable. It's important to remember that it is temporary. And let's talk about how to drive this forward so that you reap the institutional advantage of AI use. After that uncomfortable gap, teams gain fluency and workflows stabilize. Productivity accelerates, often dramatically. And legal leaders who abandon AI initiatives during the adjustment phase confuse transition cost with failure. But the answer isn't to abandon all AI use. Future-ready legal operations departments plan for this dip and lead through it. The leadership choice out of the shadows. I will close with this. Legal operations is no longer just about managing volume or controlling speed. It's about creating an institutional advantage. When AI is governed responsibly, legal teams can do more with fewer resources, reduce unnecessary reliance on outside counsel, surface risks earlier and with greater context, and strengthen their role as strategic advisor to the enterprise. AI will of legal operations, but it will in no means define it. But what will? Governance, judgment, and leadership. So the choice before legal leaders is clear. Will AI operate in the shadows, or will it become a trusted, governed capability at the heart of a future-ready legal function? Thank you, and thank you for advancing this conversation today.
Thank you, Patricia. That was super interesting. We probably have a minute to do one question. We have Zainab from the audience asking, when building that future-ready legal function, how much should they focus on governing the vendor's model versus just governing their own proprietary data? Do you have any advice on that?
Well, it depends what the vendor is and what your aims are, right? But I would say that when you're incorporating a third party vendor's product into your systems, it is critical to vet that vendor, do your diligence, look at their policies. What are they doing with data retention? What kinds of systems and controls do they have? Because when you are letting a vendor into your systems, when you're letting a product into your systems, you are leaving yourself exposed. And at the end of the day, you are the one that's going to have to answer to consumers, to your stakeholders, to regulators, right? The answer cannot, and yes, there are indemnification clauses, right? You cannot point to, well, the vendor took all of the responsibility, I just used it. Can't do that when AI is embedded into your system. This is the point that we talked about earlier, where AI doesn't just sit on top of your workflow. It is embedded into it. And when you're embedding anything, you really have to do the work.
No, that makes so much sense. Thank you so much, Patricia. That was a great session. I know the audience, we've seen a common thread around AI, having the right data. And I think the main takeaway I've gotten from the entire session is that you really need to be like working with the right AI vendors and providing for all these requirements, what Patricia mentioned, what Sophia mentioned, and also, from our prior panel as well. So again, thank you, Patricia. Before I close out the session today, everyone, you know, I was thinking through the session entirely, and we talked a lot about contract data, renegotiating your AI vendor contracts. And I decided to go a little bit rogue. At Agiloft as head of community, we recently launched a standalone AI product to extract data insights from your contracts, kind of pulling out what vendor contracts have AI provisions, what is missing that can help you get further along in your compliance. And that is just one of many different ways you can slice and dice your contract data. So I wanted to offer this for free to everyone in the audience that attended today. So just keep an eye out for the email from Techsommet. There'll be a link for you to sign up as well. And you can start playing with Astra, our AI contract intelligence tool as well. So enjoy. And thank you for joining us today at the AI in Legal second edition summit. I think there were a lot of great insights here. You've seen our panelists, our different speakers. Please do reach out to all of us on LinkedIn if you had a question that you didn't get to ask, or if you just want to connect and make new friends in this space because you might have a question in the future. So with that, thank you for joining us today, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your week and weekend, and we're out.